Tony Kahn usually comes up with mostly everything you see on television. He's got people murmuring and whispering in his ear, this and that. Maybe they should whisper and murmur in his ear a little bit more. Hey, boss man, this doesn't work. I don't think this is a good idea. People won't do that because they won't, ruffle the feathers of boss man. They won't rattle the nest. They like their cozy job to do basically nothing and be paid to do basically nothing. And they don't want to upset the fucking Tyrannosaurus Rex that's sitting in Gorilla producing and writing and formatting this show. Tony has ideas of what he wants to do. I sort of organize that information, and ultimately I give the information to the appropriate people at the appropriate time. Because you don't want too much information getting to too many people too soon because things change and this and that, and you don't want leaks or whatever. So there is a proper flow of information of who needs to know what, when, and that's what I did. I would help craft the show, but ultimately it was up to Tony. My creative fingerprints really weren't on the show almost at all. So that's what I did, especially on the live TV days when things were moving, things are changing. I'm just there in the office getting everything out of the pre-tape crew and go, hey, we got this here. We need this talent. Letting the coaches know, hey, you got this match. Right now, this is the time, but that might change. That's what I'm doing. And then he goes on to say, in regards to Tony Khan, listening to Jim Cornette's podcasts on the road. Now, Jim Cornette and Brian Last do a very good job. They're very critical of the AEW product. Cornette built up a cult following for his big rants on the state of pro wrestling, mainly AEW. He's also not afraid to call out those in the business, and he's not enamored with or, whether he's favored with these people on a personal, professional level, critical of what he perceives as bad wrestling. Two names who have counted themselves as listeners to Cornette's show are Jimmy Jacobs and Tony Khan, with Jacobs revealing to Body Slam how he and Tony would tune into Cornette's show on long drives between AEW shows. We would drive for hours, says Jimmy Jacobs, from one show to the next, and Tony would always be there, talking about wrestling, his vision for AEW, just soaking in everything. It was a chance to really bond over the things that matter, like how we want to shape the future of wrestling. Tony and I would listen to Jim Cornette's podcast during those long drives, and it became a thing. Sometimes we'd agree, sometimes we disagree. But what was most important was the passion behind what Cornette said. Gee, why isn't that aimed towards what I do? Why is what I do hate and what Jim Cornette does is passion? Don't really understand that. I digress. It was always about respecting the history of wrestling and understanding what makes the business work. Jacobs went on to say, Cornette's a polarizing figure, but you can't deny that he knows wrestling. Tony would often ask me, do you agree with Jim on this? It wasn't about agreeing with him necessarily, but more about understanding where he was coming from and applying that knowledge to what we were doing in AEW. But the thing is, Tony would listen to Jim Cornette's podcast with Jimmy Jacobs, listen to Jim Cornette shitting on the show, ask Jimmy, do you agree with Jim Cornette on this specific topic or whatever we're doing? Do you agree with him on it? And Jimmy says, it's more about understanding where he's coming from and applying that knowledge to what we're doing in AEW. But you never applied anything that Jim Cornette said. You never went and actively fixed what Jim Cornette was talking about. If there's one person that knows what is wrong with what we're watching on television, it is going to be someone like Jim Cornette, whether you like him or not. I don't really understand it. Eric Bischoff is another one that falls into that camp. You can sit there and claim that Eric Bischoff was the reason for the demise of WCW. You are allowed to have that opinion. But you can't deny his importance to the overall history of pro wrestling. And the same goes for Jim Cornette. Now, I listened to this, and I thought to myself, imagine listening to Jim Cornette shit on your show weekly, and you sit there and do nothing to change anything he's complaining about for the better. So it made me think, does Tony have some sort of weird fetish where he enjoys listening to people actively shit on what he does? Is it a case where he has a fetish, a weird fetish at that, where he loves being talked down to? Or is it just the fact that he's so power hungry? He'll listen to someone like Cornette blast Dynamite and Collision, blast a segment, blast the fucking creative on the show. Do nothing to actively change it, thinking that I can show him I can do it better than him. I'll do what I want to do, and I'm going to get people to say it's a great show and a great segment and great creative. So fuck Jim Cornette. Is it a fetish, or is it a defiance from Tony Kahn where he won't listen to what Cornette says and actively do nothing to change it in hopes that everyone around him will tell him he's doing a good job so he feels empowered and Jim Cornette feels wrong? I don't really understand how you could listen to a podcast every single week, shit on your show, shit on what you have created, which we all know has dropped off significantly. Know that this man is ready and armed every week and is going to give you nothing but upfront, honest truth about everything that's on your show. Give you criticisms and ways to fix it, ideas to help fix it. You don't take these ideas and make no changes to the show that everybody knows is not the same show anymore. You don't take any of his ideas, any of his criticisms, and apply it to what we see on television. Why? How could you listen to a show like that and take absolutely nothing from it? Which makes me believe Tony either has a fetish, a weird one, or he is defiant, thinking that he can do a better job than anybody else and wants to prove in any which way possible that Jim Cornette is wrong about what he's doing. Otherwise, he'd change it. It all goes back to Tony having a lust for power. That's it. Because I genuinely don't know how you could listen to someone like that and several other shows in the community shit on the same thing that everybody else is shitting on and do nothing to actively change the show to make it better and fix the problems that everybody is telling you are the problems for the show. We're not doing this because we hate AEW. We're not critical of AEW because we hate AEW. We want the show to be better because we believe in what Tony Khan has created and believe in the roster of talent that he has on that show weekly. It has nothing to do with hate. It has nothing to do with hating Tony Khan, hating the company, hating AEW, wanting to see it die. We want the show to be better. He's doing nothing to actively change the show for the better. Now, granted, Dynamite was a decent show. I enjoyed Collision last night. I thought Collision was better than Dynamite last night. This was the best week of AEW television from a two-show perspective in the same week all year. And we'll discuss more of that on Wednesday when Jesse returns to the show on Wednesday. We'll have a different vibe about it. I enjoyed Collision a lot. I enjoyed what happened on that show. I thought it was better than Dynamite. But two good shows in the same week after a string of bad shows is not AEW moving on and changing for the better. You need to have a string of great shows, a string of great stories, stories that matter and emotionally invest into the audience. We're not getting that right now. We're not. Granted, we have MJF moving on from Jeff Jarrett. I don't know what the fuck he's doing with Dustin Rhodes. We have Jeff Jarrett off of TV. Hopefully that stays that way. MJF's moving on to a feud with Adam Page potentially. I don't know. I don't know how everybody thinks that this is a changing of the guard. We're on the upswing here. One good week. No, you need a string of good weeks, and then maybe we'll start changing our tone. 1 week is not going to change the company for the better, and it's not going to restore the feeling. It's good. Hopefully they can keep it up. But 1 week is not going to change things. And I don't know how you listen to Jim Cornette and don't actively change the show for the better. I think that's just fucking bizarre. I really do. And Jimmy Jacobs is not going to give you the full details of what's going on there. He signed an NDA. He's not with the company anymore. We don't know how long that NDA is in effect for. He's not going to give you exactly what's going on. He's going to tell you exactly what he is able to tell you against the NDA. Do I believe he was a part of the creative? Yes. We'll never know what part of the creative, how much creative say he's had in AEW. That's something they don't want out there. Because if you found out all their secrets, then you're going to know actively who to blame. And the blame going to Tony is something that they don't want to have happen. We all just assume because he's boss man. But if we find out exactly what's going on and it all comes back to Tony Khan, not going to be a good look for Mr. Elite.